Your story is probably a very special tragedy among all these dramas. Not a lot of drivers would have shown such a reaction after a defeat like this. Your supposed farewell will be particularly special. Sport has its own laws and writes its own stories without any consideration of its protagonists. It elevates them onto a pedestal from which they can barely see the world below and immortalizes them in the history books. But it is also capable of writing dramas. Stories that leave their athletes with nothing but disappointment and frustration. Your story is probably a very special tragedy among all these dramas. In fact, your whole career was a roller coaster of emotions. You were given the chance to prove yourself early on, but unfortunately, your undeniable abilities were diminished by several mistakes. At this point, nobody was surprised to hear that you had to spend another year on the sidelines after just one season. But you didn't just sit around and do nothing for a year. You used the time gained to test for the team that builds the engine for your cars. You probably didn't think that this 1 year would later give you the possibility to drive for a top team. But sometimes a step backwards can actually help you to get forwards faster. When you later make that move to a top team, it's like a dream come true. Everything is just bigger, newer and better than before. You now actually have the possibilities to fight for wins or podiums instead of just points. But with this opportunity comes a lot of pressure to be at the front in every race. Something you never knew before. Especially your team represents the premier class of motorsport like no other. And its fans are so emotionally attached to it that it almost hurts them when their team, their pride, doesn't perform. You can't experience that with any other team, and many before you have failed to meet these expectations. But you don't seem to mind this pressure, and over the years, you become more and more of a genuine title contender. And then, it seems to be your time to go for the World Championship. You're actually doing everything right. You drive consistently, getting good results, and just drive a season that would have given you the title in many other years. The only problem is that there is this one other driver who, with his equally good performances, is able to stay right in front of you in the driver's standings for practically the whole season. And even at the season finale, which is less in your favor, after all, you're 7 points behind in second place, you're still very confident that everything can happen. However, this will require a very good performance from your side and a very poor result from your opponent. You fulfill your part of the task. Despite heavy rainfalls and difficult conditions, you cross the line in first place and pass the roaring grandstands with 10,000s of your people who've traveled from far to see their boy become the new world champion. You raise your hand as high as you can in this cramped cockpit and can't believe it. You are world champion. You have made it, even though it seemed so impossible. But while the fans in the grandstands turn into a celebrating mass of people, a drama is unfolding a few hundred meters further back. Because while you're driving your cooldown lap, probably with tears in your eyes, your rival decides the World Championship with one overtake on the last lap. Within 30 seconds, the whole situation has changed completely. It is as if someone had pulled the plug on the party at its climax. And right at this moment, probably one of the most difficult of your career, you proudly cheer on the fans on the podium while panting on your chest. Not a lot of drivers would have shown such a reaction after a defeat like this, but it once again proves how much it means to you to drive in front of your own fans. However, even after this very good season, you never really experienced the trust of your team. You get several new teammates during your time with the team, but all of them seem to be more important for them than you are, even though you've driven way longer for them. That is probably where the impression comes from that you're just a good number 2 driver, someone who's able to score points but not to win. But maybe it's down to the way you present yourself in a world with big egos and even bigger wallets. Your driving style is not very spectacular. You don't wear any fancy clothes, and you don't come up with any stories from your private life that the press can write about. You're not as spectacular as your teammates. You're more reserved, more like a reliable and loyal worker for the team. You were probably taken for granted during your time there. Your value to the team only became clear when you had to sit out for the rest of the season because of an accident in which you'd almost lost your sight. And even though the team's cars become less and less competitive over the years, the gap between you and your teammate just became too big for the team. Unfortunately, if we look at the bare numbers, you realize that after your runner-up finish, it gets more and more difficult for you to build on these results. That might explain why the farewell from your team seems rather unpleasant, and why it seems like a failed relationship. In your final few years behind the wheel, you can still show that, even with an advanced age, you can still keep up with the very best on a good day. Your supposed farewell will be particularly special. The images of you finishing your last home race after an accident, with tears in your eyes and the flag of your country on your back, while the whole pit lane applauds for you, is something I and many of you will probably never forget. And even if this isn't your final season in the sport, it once again shows how much it means to you to do your job. But you didn't just turn your back on the sport after you left. You rather used your expertise and your experience from over a decade in Formula One to pave the right way for the stars of tomorrow. In general, you seem to feel the need to use your resources to give something back to others. You recognize the opportunities that your fame gives you, and you use them to give something back to the less privileged. Of course, motorsport shouldn't be left out, and anything other than a charity race would be a bit unusual. But that's exactly what makes you so special. Your love for the sport just doesn't stop at the gates of the paddock. You don't just lie down and do nothing, even though you've earned it. But you probably wouldn't want it any other way, because your region and your sport just mean too much to you, because you are and will always be a person for whom its roots are important. You are the boy from Brazil. You are Felipe Massa, and you deserve more love.